Derek Brown sat at the bar in a luxury hotel in mid-Manhattan. He was dressed in an informal business style, jacket and trousers. It was 5:30 in the evening, and he was finishing a long day of negotiating a deal for his client, Teddy Blaine, a mid-level executive at Gaston Incorporated. Gaston was a financial firm that managed money. The U.S. attorney in New York believed she was laundering money for several Eastern European criminals. Rick negotiated a deal today, one that involved his client's cooperation in exchange for leniency at sentencing. Derek thought he did a good job for Teddy. He decided to have a beer before dinner. He was not surprised when he saw his neighbor, Jane Hall, enter the bar. Not surprised when he saw his neighbor, Jane Hall, enter the bar. Jane was also in New York to negotiate the deal, but she represented Gaston. Jane was a partner at Logan & Speck, which had maybe 2,000 lawyers around the world. Compared to Rick, she was legal royalty, but they had known each other for years, since college. Both lived in suburban Virginia near Washington. Their houses were 2 blocks away. Jane saw Rick sitting at the bar. She glanced at him. He smiled. She frowned. That was all their business interaction for that evening. Jane had another meeting the next day with the prosecutor. Derek's smile gave her a warning. Jane sat down next to Rick and ordered Chardonnay. She asked, "How are you? Are you staying the night?" "Yes, tomorrow at noon by train." "And you?" "I need to stay. Just one more day, I think." Rick was 40. He was 5 feet 11 inches tall, weighed 170 pounds, with brown hair and eyes. He was in good physical shape. Jane knew because they sometimes ran together and played tennis in the same club as their spouses. Jane was also 40. She didn't like it. She believed that women experienced this more difficult than men, so to speak. She was a beautiful woman, blonde, curvy, but also in good shape. On days when she was dressed for business, like today, she tried to emphasize not her curves. But Rick knew she had a great figure from seeing her in tennis and running clothes. They flirted frequently, often right in front of their spouses. This went on for years and never resulted in anything more than a few slow dances. The two finished their drinks and Rick suggested, "How about dinner? We can eat here. The food is great. Are you agreed?" "At 7. "Great. See you later." Jane thought that Rick might see a lot more of her than ever before. She'd been thinking about this trip ever since she found out Rick was going too. He didn't say anything, but her firm had enormous resources. She knew he was coming and planned to meet him on the train as if it were an accident. They rose together and did not talk about work. But Rick knew that Jane's company represented Gaston. Each of them had children who were in college. Jane's sons both attended private school under the American system. One was in his 2nd year, the other in his 1st year. Rick's daughters attended the University of Virginia. They both played volleyball there. A partial scholarship helped Rick pay for his education. As Rick approached the hotel restaurant, he turned around and saw Jane in a little black dress. He was surprised. I expected to see something less provocative, but Jane was dressed to seduce. Some pearls accentuated the low neckline, and the dress ended above the knee. It was also tight, not drawn on the body, but it definitely emphasized all of Jane's advantages. Rick trusted Jane. This wasn't the first time they worked in the same field for work. She never used their personal friendship on these occasions. Rick's cases were mostly criminal. Jane's affair isn't much, but enough that they know each other professionally, even if they weren't friends. The hostess led them to their table. As they sat down, Rick said, "Jane, you look so great, but that's just me, baby." Jane looked at him for a moment. She smiled and said, "I always know what I'm doing, Rick." Rick thought about this for a few seconds. He said, "I hope so." Jane just patted his hand when the waiter came over to ask about drinks. They received the menu and decided to choose red wine. Jane ordered the one she liked. Rick was faithful to his wife, May, throughout their long marriage. Of course, he was sometimes tempted, but he never really came close to giving in. One day, not long ago, May asked him a troubling question. "If you could have sex with one woman in the whole world other than me, who would it be?" Rick was usually good at staying quiet when it was best, but he immediately knew the answer and said it. "Jane." May wasn't surprised. She had seen them flirt over the years. May wasn't surprised. She had seen them flirt over the years. Even if Rick had kept his mouth shut, she would have known the answer. She was surprised by what he told her. She was also glad that he didn't ask her the same question. Jane and Rick had a great dinner and finished off a bottle of red. Then Jane said, "There's a club here. Let's pay and go." Rick sensed danger, but was weak. He happily agreed. Both went to a dance club adjacent to the hotel. The club had a good quintet of musicians playing a variety of dance tunes. Rick and Jane had danced together before, but never when they weren't in close proximity to their spouses. That night, Jane took Rick to the dance floor, in close proximity to their spouses. That night, Jane took Rick to the dance floor and they danced close together. Jane kept Rick on edge for half an hour before she took him to her room. She opened the door and pulled Rick into the room. She pulled him into a kiss. Rick tried to resist Jane. On the dance floor, both understood perfectly what was happening. Jane whispered in his ear, "I know what you want. You can have it tonight, just for one night. You can have me." Rick was subdued and went with her to her room. He only half believed that this would happen. The kiss at the door was hotter than anything Rick had ever experienced before. He picked Jane up and carried her to the bed. Now it was impossible to stop. Jane's dress was off in seconds. She was loud. Part of him couldn't believe this was happening, something he had fantasized about for years. Now, lying next to her, he asked, "Why tonight?" "Because we're here, away from home. Because I've longed for you all these years. Just for this night, though. Tomorrow, we'll come home and we'll just be friends again." Rick said, "Okay, let's make the most of it." And that's exactly what they did. Her claim that it was only for one night was violated twice in the morning. But Rick left by 9 and Jane went to the meeting. Jane thought she might be embarrassed by her betrayal. She had never been with another man before, since she married Melvin. She was also sure as she could be, that Mel was faithful to her. Nevertheless, here she committed treason. It worked. The two prosecutors were guys and seemed to sense something about her. Both flirted with her. She made a good deal with them, not giving up anything. A little flirting was all it took. Mel Hall went to May and Rick's house around 6 in the evening. Mel delivered an invoice for services his company performed, updating the back deck of a home. May asked him to bring it after his workday ended. Mel changed out of his work clothes. He did not always go to the objects, mostly he observed. But that day he worked on the roof for 5 hours, replacing it. He came home, showered, and put on shorts and a t-shirt to deliver the bill. He also knew from May that there were some details that needed to be clarified. Loose nails, crooked board. So when Mel rang the doorbell, he looked pretty fresh. May answered quickly. She wore a pink and gray sundress with a plunging neckline and short length. May was a very attractive woman. She was tall, slender, with long dark hair. Her dark eyes matched her hair. Mel always thought she was very sexy. However, unlike his wife and her husband, they did not flirt openly. However, both were aware of their mutual attraction. As in any marriage with some history, both were tempted. May was constantly making advances at her. She was a primary school principal, and before that, she was a teacher. At her, she was a primary school principal, and before that, she was a teacher. Young fathers easily expressed their admiration for her. Mel visited houses, and sometimes only the wives were there. He received many unobtrusive offers, and some were quite open. He never gave in. Mel was the same height as May, but he wasn't skinny. He weighed 205 pounds, and it was mostly muscle. He was obviously very strong. His strength increased because he did a lot of physical work. He had blonde hair and a ponytail and blue eyes. They had known each other since college. Mel was sexually naive and shy when he met Jane, May's good friend. Jane quickly changed that. She took it for herself and held it. He paid for her law school by starting his own construction business. It definitely paid off. Law school. May let Mel in and showed him the problems with the new deck. Mel had a toolbox with him. He quickly saw several problems that May had pointed out. He opened the drawer and took out his tool. May watched his movements. He was not as smooth or athletic as her husband. But God, he looked so good, strong and smooth-skinned. May felt a sinking feeling in her stomach as she looked at him, knowing they were alone and knowing what she had planned for her friend's husband. When Mel completed the repairs in a few minutes, he gave May the bill. She wrote him a check for the remaining amount. As she did this, she leaned over him and he saw that she was not wearing a bra. Mel began to get aroused, despite himself. It seemed to him that May was giving him hints. May gave him the check. She then patted his arm as he sat at the kitchen table. May spoke in a quiet voice. Such a big, strong hand, so big and smooth. She leaned over him, showing off her breasts again. She kissed his hand, she licked it. Now Mel had no doubt about what May wanted. He was afraid to get up. Then his fear disappeared as May turned his face to hers and kissed him. Mel picked her up, reciprocating the feeling. May moaned. She said, "Carry me to the bed, big boy. I'm yours for tonight. One night. I've always wanted you all this time. Now I'm yours." Mel carried her upstairs to the bedroom and laid her gently on the king-size bed, then took off his shirt. As she did so, May slid down in front of him and unbuttoned his shorts. They were exhausted for a short time. But May wrapped her arms around Mel and whispered, "It was so good. You're amazing. I should have done this when we were young." After a while, at sunset, May stood up and asked, "Do you want a beer?" "Oh yes." They didn't bother getting dressed because the lights were off. They each drank a bottle of beer. Sam Adams' IPA was his favorite. When he saw this, he knew that May had planned all of this. He asked, "Why did you seduce me now?" "Because I've always wanted to do this and now seemed like a good time. We're all 40, all four of us. I'm fucking 40, but I still have it. And so do you." Mel said after a pause, "I never worried about 40. You are not a woman. You can have children for many more years. But we're not going to have any more children, neither of us." "Mel, I think we should have sex again." "Yes, ma'am." "Can you still carry me?" He picked it up and calmly walked up the stairs. Both of them slept for maybe 2 hours. Each of them was close to insatiable. When day came, Mel was the first to wake up. He had to go to work. He called and said he would be late, left at 10. He never found his underwear. In his life, this night will be a bright beacon until his death. As he walked away, May said, "Don't say a word to anyone, Mel. Once and never again, no matter how much we want it again. Okay? Yes. Let's go back to life as it was." He went to his car. May was rushing to school to be there by 11. Rick arrived home late in the afternoon, and May arrived just a few minutes later. They ordered pizza and drank beer. The IPA had celery. Rick drank at Stroh's camp. They had a nice time watching an old movie, and then when it was time for bed, something exploded. They suddenly attacked each other. Heavy breathing, wild sex twice. It was all over in an hour, a good end to a long day. Rick thought the reason was his affair with Jane the night before and that morning. May was just glad that this happened. She hoped this would continue for a while. This was the plan. Jane arrived home late at night, having rented a car for the trip. She went into the house and found Mel sleeping. She showered and snuggled up to him, but he never woke up. In the morning, she brushed her teeth, and so did he. She then pushed him into the bedroom and attacked him. He quickly overcame his initial stiffness. Jane was delighted. Jane worried that sex with her husband might not be the same after the affair, and he really wasn't like that. He was better. It was a Friday, and the couples didn't see each other over the weekend. However, each couple spent a lot of time in bed or having sex in another room. For each couple, it was like rejuvenation. The following Tuesday, Jane and May met in the park during lunch break. They were dressed for business. They sat on a bench away from other people. It was a little windy. Jane said, "Well," May replied, "I did it. I had a great time with Mel, and now Rick is practically carrying me in his arms. What about you?" Jane smiled. "Same thing. Rick is a tiger, and now Mel wants me all the time. I thought I'd feel guilty. But no." May said, "I didn't exactly feel guilty when Mel pinned me against the wall. But the next day, before Rick and I went to bed, maybe a little, we made promises to them, right? We gave, and they'll never know we did it. Men don't talk about it, not like we do." May said, "As much as I enjoyed Mel, I won't do it again. I won't. Too risky." Mel's car was outside all night, and we were loud. We said no details, so no details. Were the windows closed? Yes. Okay then. They ate the sandwiches they brought and drank water. Then they returned to work. 10 days later, Rick arrived home early on a Friday, because the trial he was involved in had ended in a quick acquittal. He was in a great mood. He went up to the bedroom to change clothes for a run. When he took the coins out of his pocket to hang up his trousers, several coins fell out. He wasn't one to let little things go to waste. He started picking up coins. One rolled under the bed. When he took it out, he noticed something else there. He pulled it out. These were BBD men's briefs of extra large size, not his. He wore large boxers. After a moment of thought, he realized whose underpants they were. He sat on the floor for quite a long time. I heard the front door open and May screamed, "Honey, I'm home." Rick stood up and hid the offending object in the pocket of his running shorts. He went downstairs. May was in the kitchen. Rick shouted that he was going for a run and left the house. He ran about a mile before stopping. He ran quite quickly. He sat down on a park bench. "I thought about my situation." Rick jogged back home and went down to the basement where he hid the underpants in his baseball bag. He had a game that evening at 7. He went upstairs. May was unhappy that he left without kissing her. He gave her a cursory kiss on the forehead. Said, "I just need a quick sandwich. You remember I have a game today." Said, "I just need a quick sandwich. You remember I have a game today at 7. I'll be home by 11. May was annoyed, but she had been warned about the game they usually didn't play on Friday. This was a rescheduled game. She said softly, "I'll be looking forward to seeing you." Rick tried to smile his best. May smiled back, but she was confused by his reaction. "Is there something wrong?" "No. I won the case." "Great. Oh, but you don't look so happy. Another guy on the street who probably should be behind bars." "Okay, I need to get ready." Rick picked up his baseball bag and soon left. He drove to Mel's house and picked him up. They played on a baseball team together. It was funny. They used metal bats and played on high school fields, lots of home runs. But it was a little dangerous, especially for the pitchers. Rick had been unusually quiet during the trip. Mel asked about it when they parked. Rick said, "I'll talk to you about it after the game." It was an exciting game, won by their team. Ziz's 10-9 in the last at-bat. Chalk scored the winning run. They walked up to Rick's car. He opened the back door for their bags. With his bag on the ground, he unzipped the small pocket on the side and took out Mel's underpants. Rick lifted his underpants for Mel to see. He tossed them to Chalk. "Yours, I think." Mel was overcome with a feeling of anxiety. It always bothered him that he left home in different clothes than he came in. He knew what he said. "Not thank you. They were under my bed. You slept with May when I was in New York." Mel's heart sank. He stepped away from Rick, said, "I couldn't help myself." She started from the beginning. "I'm so sorry." "Damn. You're only sorry because I found out. I bet you liked it. She did too, right?" "Rick, we've been friends for a long time. I've known her for over 20 years. I've always wanted her. Until that day, she never let me know. But you're right. I can't say I regret it." "What happened?" Rick looked at Mel, his best friend, who betrayed this friendship, just like himself. He said, "I slept with Jane in New York that same night, and the next morning too, many times. We both had a great time." Mel was amazed. He clenched his fist. You damn. What can I say? Crap. I can't even. We're equally to blame." Rick said, "They set us up, Mel. It was a change, but they didn't ask us." Mel sat down on the sidewalk. He began to sob, didn't say anything. Rick let him cry. Rick was surprised that he was crying. Rick is used to seeing the worst in people, just not that close to home. He had more time to think about the situation and did not come to any conclusions. But his big strong friend was devastated. It was sad to watch. Mel stopped crying. He said, "What should we do? Can I trust you not to go home and hurt her? I mean, I want to push them both at the same time, tomorrow night." "Oh my God, Rick, I'm not like you. Tell her you're sick." "I felt sick at the game. I can tell May the same thing. Cold." And that's what Mel did. He was not a good liar. He pretended to be sick and slept in the guest room. Rick told May that Mel had something wrong with his food, but he invited Mel and Jane to a barbecue tomorrow at 6. May looked a little embarrassed. Rick had no intention of having sex with May that night. Maybe never again. He was absolutely not happy with their evil plan. Thinking about it only made him angrier. So when May wanted affection, he did not respond, and May began to worry. The next morning, Rick got up at 5 in the morning. May pretended to be asleep. She heard him leave. She saw him running down the street in his sports uniform. Something was wrong. Rick never hosted social events. However, Jane and Mel are coming over for dinner tonight. Rick came in and out all day, went shopping, and looked into the office. He then mowed the lawn and sanded the edges along the sidewalk. Mel woke up late, and Jane was downstairs. She asked him how he was feeling. "Pretty good. We'll be fine by dinner." "What dinner?" "Rick invited us to a barbecue at 6 today. I'd agreed before I got sick." "Ah, barbecue, Chalk." Mel said. "He wanted to try something. We'll just have to see. What do you have today?" Jane was getting ready to go shopping and stop by work. Now she thought something was wrong. She peered at Mel. She stopped. She said, I'm going to buy an outfit and drop by at work. Mel sighed in relief. She saw it. A chill ran down her spine. But she went to change clothes for shopping. Mel refused breakfast, so she left. As soon as she left the house, she called May's mobile. She said, May, it's me. Mel is acting strange. He was fine before the game. He said he was sick. But he is not a deceiver. May said, Rick didn't want sex last night. Now he's gone. They have no way of knowing. They would never talk about it. They would never admit it. Jane was almost sure something had happened. She didn't want to cause May to panic. She said, well, we can just see what happens. See you at 6. Please don't give Rick any reason to suspect us. But May, wear something sexy tonight. We may need to improvise. Mel and Jane arrived exactly at 6. Rick opened the door. Mel was wearing beige shorts and a Hawaiian shirt. He was not elegant in dress. Jane was wearing a summer dress, tight at the top and loose at the bottom, on high heels. She looked great. Rick immediately suspected a trick. He led them inside and May went downstairs. She was dressed to seduce. She wore a spaghetti strap top and a short frilly skirt, also in high heels. Rick now knew they were in for a wild night. He hasn't decided, not completely, what he wants to do. But underneath his calm, he was red with rage. This made him tense. Mel wasn't so knowledgeable. He and Rick didn't have a plan. Mel didn't know what to do, but he noticed May. His eyes were constantly glued to her as Rick poured drinks. Rick found an IPA in the refrigerator and took it out to heat it up. He gave one to Chalk and a Pinot Grigio for the women. He himself drank Stroh's. Rick made rockfish and fingerling potatoes. It didn't take long. He served dinner at 645. The four sat on the patio to eat. So far, the conversation hasn't been particularly exciting. But Jane approached him while he was grilling. What's going on, Rick? I hope everything is okay. Rick looked into her eyes. Why are you both dressed like that? Is there something going on here? She looked away. Please, Rick. Mel, I don't want him to get hurt. Rick laughed at her. He didn't answer. Instead, he served dinner. The dinner conversation was tense. Jane and Rick didn't talk much. Mel and May chatted nervously. Rick put away the dishes and took out some cookies. He then threw Mel's underwear on the table. I found them under the bed. They belonged to Mel. He left them while he was entertaining you, May, in our bed. What was it? He looked straight at May. She said, you entertained Jane. We're even. Rick looked at Mel. Are we even, Mel? No, no way. They set us up. I would never agree to an exchange. Rick said, me too. So May, this is the end for us. One night of fun, we're done, fun and end rhymes. Jane said, Rick, what are you saying? For God's sake, one night, and you had fun? I know this for sure. Yes, without a doubt. One of the last fun parties of my life, you mean evil, treacherous witch. One of the last fun parties of my life, you mean evil, treacherous witch. His voice was angry. He turned to May. Both of you, I have to say. Jane was completely shocked by Rick's reaction. She looked at her husband. She said, Mel, I hope you don't hate me. I tried to spice up our lives, and I succeeded. Our sex has gotten better since then. May began to sob quietly. She knew her marriage was over. She knew Rick was right about what they had done. She slowly got up and walked into the house. Rick didn't follow her. Mel watched May leave. He asked Jane, was it all worth it? Jane was rooted to the spot. She didn't expect this. When she imagined what might happen, she thought that perhaps they would exchange partners again as soon as she could arrange it. Now, she was desperately trying to save her marriage. Mel stood up. He went into the house. Turning at the door, he said, I'm leaving without dessert. You can call an Uber wherever you need to go. He disappeared inside. A minute later, they heard the car start. Jane and Rick sat in silence. She said, you might as well keep your mouth shut. Everything would be great. We could trade or we could forget about it. But you had to ruin everything. I couldn't let that happen. Tricks and lies. I may never be able to trust another woman again as long as I live. That's what you did, Jane. You and my smug wife. You did it. You made it much worse than necessary. You're a bastard. She took out her phone and went inside. He waited until he heard her leave and the car pulled up. Rick sat outside for a while longer. He ate a cookie and drank another Stroh's. but he knew that sooner or later he would have to take care of May. She was lying on the bed in their bedroom, still fully clothed. She seemed to be sleeping. Rick looked at her, married to her for so long, usually not stupid. He didn't understand. He went to the guest room where he moved some of his things before dinner. He didn't sleep well. He woke up, if you can call it an awakening, at 5 in the morning. It was dark outside. He put on his gym clothes and walked out the back door. He ran 5 miles and felt better. When he returned, May was in the shower. It was Sunday. Rick went downstairs to the basement bathroom, took a shower, and put on shorts and a t-shirt. He was in the kitchen making coffee when May came down. She looked at him. She was crying again. She said, "What can I do to heal us, Rick? I don't want to break up." "Then you shouldn't have been scheming and having sex with my best friend. You got Jane. You always wanted her. May, why did you do this? After so many years? I don't understand. Jane and I always talked, about sex. We were turned on when we talked about our husbands. We're 40 now, Rick. We are getting old. We wanted to spice up our lives and maybe see what it's really like for each other. And you decided to deceive your husbands. Neither of you would agree. We knew it, right? What would happen if I gave up Jane? Or if Mel had given up on you? I resisted Jane until I couldn't. I don't know. We knew we would get what we wanted. Men are weak. That's what Jane said, and we thought you'd never know. May, was it worth what it would cost? I don't know what it will cost. But even if we stayed together, it wouldn't be worth it. I know I broke the trust we had. Yes, never coming back, May, never." He fell silent. "But you will always have fond memories of the royal time you had with Mel, and I have my memories of Jane. Are we breaking up? You said it last night. I was very angry last night, still angry. But I don't see a way forward with you, perhaps with someone else." May cried again, and Rick, although touched, did not come over. When she realized that he was not going to console her, she walked up the stairs. They didn't talk much the rest of the day. Rick was outside working in the garden. He considered his options. This was the woman he had deeply loved for over 20 years, and he believed, until now, that he knew her. Now he wondered who this woman was, because the woman he married would never set him up like that. On Monday, Rick consulted with a family lawyer at offices near his. He learned that they would likely divide property in a divorce and that he would likely not have to pay alimony. They could sell the house and use that money for different living spaces. He told the lawyer, Jennifer Morin, to prepare documents based on irreconcilable differences. He told her not to hand them over yet. He called Mel. Mel was at work, but in his office, placing orders for supplies. Rick asked, "How are you feeling?" "Fine." "Well, not very normal. I miss her. Why did they have to do this?" "You'll have to ask her. May said she always wanted you." "Why did you sleep with her?" She kind of took me. She's sexy, as you know. Mel, our wives, I think, enjoyed sex with us more than marital sex, partly because it was new and different, and because we were better with them when we cheated. I just can't get over the idea that May's best sexual memory of our marriage is with you." "You mean your marriage is over?" "I don't see any other solution. I'll let it sit for a while, though. And you? She's coming to dinner tonight." "Well, good luck. Do you already know that you want her back?" "Almost. Aren't you furious?" "Was. Now there is no. Sex with May was a gift, and Jane gave it to me. Understand? Well, see you later." He quickly disconnected, and he thought that he was not only losing his wife, but also his friend. This last answer ruined the friendship, and that conversation was also a big factor in Rick's decision to tell Jennifer Morin to file and deliver. Rick didn't go home Monday night. He drove to a cheap motel and turned off his phone. He filed a motion to reschedule a short trial he had scheduled for personal reasons. He made a list of what he needed to do. He slept well once he got used to the noise outside. May was sad and panicked when Rick didn't come home from work. She made his favorite dish, meat muffin and coleslaw. She waited and then tried to call, but the phone was switched off. She ate a little and put the rest away. She slept little, but the next day she had to go to work. Rick went to his bank as soon as it opened. He split the bills. He then stopped by his old house after May left for work as usual. He packed a bunch of things and left her a note that he was going to move. Then he actually moved. He found a one-room apartment next to the office and rented it on the spot. He brought his things there and ordered a simple double bed from Amazon. He bought an air mattress for that evening at Walmart. as well as some dishes, sheets, towels, glasses, and plates. The saleswoman at the checkout asked, "Are you leaving her? How do you know? You have a ring on your finger, but you are buying things for the apartment. Think twice, though. I've been through this and it's not great." When he brought the things to the new place, he took off the ring and put it in his briefcase. He called his baseball manager to inform him that he would no longer play. The manager, Ray, asked why. "Personal problems. I couldn't play with Melvin anyway." "Oh, well, keep us in mind. I hope you change your mind." He went to the store and bought food for cooking. Then he sat down and cried his eyes out for 40 minutes. Then he turned on the phone. There were a lot of messages, mostly from May, but also from her parents and his parents. Jane left a message asking him to call her back. The girls also left the same message. The last message from May was after she was handed it when she returned home from school. She was sobbing again. "Please, please, Rick. I love you so much." "Oh, that's too much." He was difficult to understand. While he was listening to the messages, the phone rang. It was Jane. He replied. She screamed, "You are cruel. You will kill her. God, get over it. Mel and I are back together. He's not acting like a baby over all this. Hello to you two, evil witch. May and I are done. Get used to it. Maybe you can share your husband with her. It doesn't seem to bother you. Bastard. For an expensive lawyer, you have a limited vocabulary. You're acting like a baby. You need what? I need to see you 3-1 last time, and that's what I do. I'm leaving the nightmare." Jane calmed down. You could hear her breathing heavily as she did this. Then she said, "Rick, you are making a decision too quickly. It's too fresh for you. You need to back off." "Jane, it's too early for Mel to decide to stay with you. He needs to rethink." "No, he doesn't need to. Of course I screwed up. I slept with you. But damn, you were the only man in the world I would do this with. And now, there is no one. He's safe. Jane, this is just sophistry. If some cutie came along, you would jump into bed with him. Then she would try to hide it. May too. I understand that you may think this way about me. But not about May. But she jumped into bed with Mel. She did it. He would never try with her. He's different. We have all been friends and close ones for a long time. No one else is as close to her as Mel. Not good enough. I need to move on. I'm divorcing her. Don't interfere. Someone from my firm will represent her. You will talk to her. Trust me. Leave me alone. You, Mel and May, leave me alone." He disconnected. 2 nights later, there was a knock on Rick's door. These were his daughters. He opened the door and hugged them both. Sarah, the elder by 3 minutes, took the initiative. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Mom is terrified." I said, "Me too." "Was this explained to you?" Jen said, "Mom told us that you and Mel and Jane switched partners for one night. Then you got angry. Well, Jane and your mom came up with a plan to seduce me and Mel. Jane followed me to New York, and she managed to seduce me. Your mom called Mel over to our house and seduced him. They thought it was so cool. We would never know the whole truth, only our own part. But I found out," Sarah screamed. "You mean they set you up?" "Yes, and to my shame, I fell into a trap." Jen looked at her father. "But it's over. Can't you forgive and forget?" No, I'm not that kind of person. Mel and Jane are back together. Mel was glad that Jane gave him the opportunity to sleep with your mother. So we're not friends anymore. Jane says you're acting like a coward, wounded ego, because Mom liked it with Mel. And what? Maybe that's part of what you're risking when you cheat. Maybe your spouse will have a wounded ego and will never be able to overcome it. Would you like a beer? No, we need to drive. Coffee. He gave them coffee and sent them on their way. Jane's firm, represented by Carl Pearson, partner, filed a response to the divorce petition. May opposed the divorce, saying that she believed in saving marriage, but Rick knew that if he wanted it, he would get it. And he wanted it. At the first court hearing, the judge ordered 8 sessions of consultations and a report to the court. Rick was warned. He and Mrs. Martin agreed to see one of the family therapists, Elizabeth Borden. Before the first session, Rick was overcome with excitement. He arrived 5 minutes before the start, and May was already in the waiting room. He nodded to her. She smiled at him. "Is that all I get after 20 years? "Yes, the first 19 odd were good." Then he shrugged as Mrs. Borden opened the door. She was a neatly dressed woman, about 50 years old, short but sweet. She explained her role, which was to study the situation and report to the court on the possibility of the marriage surviving. She asked Rick, "I read the summary of facts. Why did you ask for a divorce?" "Because May planned with her friend so they could sleep with someone else's husband. They knew that neither of us would agree. Betrayal, in my opinion. May, what could motivate you to do this? It seems really insidious, to say the least." "I agree. This was wrong. I immediately apologized." But Rick never listened. He just wanted to leave. "What makes you believe that a marriage can be saved?" "Because I will never do this again. Never." "Rick, do you believe her?" "Maybe. I've learned that you can never be sure." May turned to Rick. "I'll never do this again, Rick. I swear." Mrs. Moran said to Rick, "What about you? You also avoided fidelity." "I did it. I will always regret this." This is a sincere statement, but May doesn't regret her night with Mel. "Not in my heart." May hesitated. "I know it was wrong to deceive men. I know it was wrong to deceive men." Mrs. Moran asked, "But do you regret having sex?" "No." Rick said. "That's it." Mrs. Moran asked, "Rick, do you regret having sex with Jane?" "Yes, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." "Was that good sex?" "Yes, but it was wrong. I was weak." May was not weak. She got what she wanted. "She's sorry I found out." Rick attended his next session 2 days later. Mrs. Moran wanted to know how he reacted to the first one. Rick said it was a waste of time. "I can't go back to her." "You loved her all these years. One mistake. Is love lost?" "I wouldn't say that. I don't trust her, and I don't believe I ever will. Suppose she wants to go out with the girls in the evening. You will be insecure. Maybe she's with some guy. She changed tactics." "Rick, were you able to forgive me?" "No, I cannot." There were tears in his eyes. "Have you forgiven yourself?" "No, more than May, maybe. I was caught off guard, but I betrayed my principles. She wanted me to do it." The sessions continued in the same spirit. Rick was always polite to May, but distant. There was no real progress. May was on the verge of giving up. During the 7th lesson, Rick asked, "May, have you seen anyone since I left?" May replied, "No, if you mean dating or sex." "What about Jane?" "Yes, she's my friend. I see her." "At her house?" May felt uncomfortable. She said, "Yes, and Mel is there. But I didn't even touch him." "Why do you go there, you know?" "I would guess." "Nothing happened. When I go there, which is not even touch him." "Why do you go there, you know?" "I would guess." "Nothing happened. When I go there, which is not often, we talk." Mrs. Moran asked, "Are you talking about what happened?" "Sometimes." "Mel is very sad that Rick doesn't want to talk to him." "Sometimes he cried, but not lately." Mrs. Moran continued. "And Jane, how does she feel about all this?" Mrs. Moran continued. "And Jane, how does she feel about all this?" "She knows we messed up. She thinks Rick went too far. The last session went just like all the others. Rick just wasn't flexible." Mrs. Moran wrote a report to the court saying May's desire to renew the marriage was not shared by Rick, and probably never would be. The divorce was finalized 8 months after the application was filed. May couldn't afford to buy out Rick's share of the house. They sold it and split the money. She moved into a small apartment near her school. 10 years later, Rick had just completed a long trial and was about to celebrate his 50th birthday on Saturday. His daughters and mother arranged it. His father died 2 years ago. Rick had 3 grandchildren. Jen had 2 boys, 4 and 2 years old. Sarah had a girl, 5 years old. They both married local guys and lived about 40 minutes from Rick. He saw them often. He studiously avoided prolonged contact with May. He didn't hate her, but he didn't love her either. He felt like he never got a decent explanation for why she did what she did. He didn't hate her, but he didn't love her either. He felt like he never got a decent explanation for why she did what she did. It didn't matter now. She lived in Fairfax, near the mall. But he tried not to visit his daughters when she could be nearby. Christmas was an exception. Then everyone got together. Rick just didn't talk to May much. Neither Rich nor May remarried. Rick had many sexual relationships after his divorce. Single women, divorced women, never a married woman. He was looking for nothing more than sex and company. His law practice was thriving and he was considering partial retirement. Big trials are the work of the young. He was in good physical shape and athletic, but he wanted to do something less stressful. At the age of 10, he was in a semi-cohabiting relationship with a young prosecutor from Washington, DCL Davis was pretty, 32 years old, and worked late. They were silently exclusive. It took May quite some time before she started dating. She was an attractive woman, and when she ventured out into the world, she had no problem finding partners. Now, 10 years later, she still hasn't found anyone who brings her as much pleasure in bed as Rick does. She also didn't find anyone as funny outside of bed. She had long ago admitted to herself that she had made a big mistake when she and Jane pulled off their prank. May continued to see Jane and Melvin for some time. However, she never slept with Mel. She was offered by both Jane and Mel. She refused. The three gradually drifted away from each other. She hasn't seen them for 2 years. We exchanged Christmas cards. She was now 50 and depressed. She went from working as a school principal to working in school administration. She earned good money and did not experience financial difficulties. She spent a lot of time with her grandchildren. This was her life. At the age of 10, she had a friendship with a Fairfax teacher, Ray Drayton. He was a little younger. Rick never spoke to Jane or Mel after the divorce. The two were no longer together. Jane started an affair with a young lawyer from her firm. When he found out, Mel beat the guy to a pulp. He was never persecuted. His firm settled his claim for a large sum of money. The guy was fired and Jane's percentage was reduced. Their divorce went smoothly. Mel's business flourished. He moved from a house to a condo in Clarendon. There were a lot of young people living there. Young women. He didn't miss company. He eventually remarried a woman he met at his gym. Greta Wilson was a magnificent woman who appreciated Mel and his thriving business. Magnificent woman who appreciated Mel and his thriving business. When he learned about all this, Rick thought that Mel was prone to self-punishment, so be it. Christmas 2022 was the first big family event after the virus disrupted everything. Jen and Sarah, their families, Rick, May, their mothers, and the girls-in-laws. Big event. Sarah had a large house in Lowdown, enough space to seat everyone. There was dinner on Christmas Day. Rick brought with him a bag full of gifts, like Santa. His grandchildren greeted him noisily. He said deeply, "Ho, ho, ho." May was already there and she was laughing along with everyone else, but her laughter was empty, without joy. Seeing Rick, especially among his family, struck her to the core. He seemed so happy. She knew that he had a young woman who spent many nights at his house in Alexandria. Rick greeted everyone and hugged May. Nothing special. Rick survived her. At least that's what he thought. But her hug was the last, and she whispered in his ear, "I want to talk tonight, someday." He stepped back and nodded. Then he moved on. Dinner was great. In accordance with previously expressed wishes, Rick was seated at one end of the table and May at the other. But Sarah sat May's mother next to Rick and Rick's mother next to May. When Rick noticed this, he looked at Sarah. She simply smiled. Rick thought she was a schemer, like her mother. But he had to admit that and how he himself was. Rick and Clara Main, May's mother, were having a pleasant conversation. Rick also spoke with Sarah's husband's father, Jake Miller, and there was a lot of table sharing. Towards the end, when the pumpkin pie came out, May's mom looked at Rick and said, "I can see that. It's a shame that all of this happened. So sad." This made Rick feel like he was going to cry. He held on though. After all, he is a man. He ate a small piece of pie. After all, he is a man. He ate a small piece of pie. He knew that May had made him. She always prepared it for Christmas Eve. It tasted as good as ever, and he told her so. After dinner, Rick went outside. Global warming has had some benefits. It was 50 degrees. May waited a moment and followed him. They stood side by side on the patio, looking out into the night. May said, "Have you ever wondered what things would have been like? You know, if all this hadn't happened." "Yes, but you mean if you had never done this or if I had never left you, it would have been different." "I know. It was the worst mistake of my life. Nothing else even comes close." He said in a choked voice, "I loved you so much, May. So much. And I gave it away. But Rick, you could have stayed. It will never happen again." "Perhaps not, May. But I was devastated and I couldn't live with it. I needed to leave. I would have died, and maybe I would have taken you with me." She had tears. This statement pierced her right through. She never understood the depth of pain she caused Rick. Didn't really understand. She blamed him for being harsh. Now she saw that he really had no choice. She said, "Oh God," Rick said, "May, my wounds are almost completely healed. How about you? No, I can't say that. Even now, not a week goes by that I don't miss you. Yes, everything I value went up in smoke. Marriage, friendships, emotional security, gone. But I made it through. I heard you have a young, sexy partner. And I heard you have a young boyfriend. He's 44. He has to work hard to please me. Rick laughed. Successful. Sometimes. That's all a 50-year-old woman can ask for. No. You could have looked and gotten something better. I tried. No one could be like you. Rick frowned, except Mel. May said, let's go back inside. People will all start speculating. In fact, when they returned to the party, they looked askance. But the children fell asleep, and the adults opened the gifts. Rick and May did not exchange gifts by prior arrangement. That night, Rick slept alone. Elle was visiting her parents in Ohio for the holidays. He thought about his conversation with May. He thought about whether he wanted a new family with Elle. Because if not, then it wouldn't be fair to keep her around. He thought about whether he wanted a new family with Elle. Because if not, then it wouldn't be fair to keep her around. He didn't sleep well, perhaps because of dinner. Christmas Day was fun. The kids opened gifts, including a really huge teddy bear for each family from Rick. He took a photo of all three of them with their bears. He then put May on one of them and took a photo of her. Later, he sent her this photo. There was another big dinner, turkey and trimmings. There was football on TV, but Rick wasn't interested. He sat outside again and May joined him. She said, thanks for the photo with the bear. I should have sent it. You looked so good. She looked down. I will always love you, Rick, no matter what. He looked at her. He said, me too. She smiled. Does this mean that you will always love yourself too? He laughed. You know what I mean. There's nothing I can do about it. She perked up. I want to take you to dinner, maybe midweek. Dinner? Oh, and dancing just like old times. Okay, it's a date just like old times. They met on Wednesday, the 28th. Rick was nervous. He wasn't sure what he wanted or what she wanted. If pressed, he would have admitted that he thought she wanted to rekindle the relationship. And if so, what does he think about it? The date went very well. They ate a nice, light, expensive dinner and then went dancing at a club where they played music for the older generation. They talked about what their lives had become. But mostly, they enjoyed each other's physical presence. They both danced well and enjoyed it. They ended up in her bed. She pulled him out of the Uber, out the door. Then they kissed, and they immediately went to the bedroom. At first, it was awkward to undress. They did it. They stood looking at each other, uncertain. How did they look compared to their old selves 10 years ago? The moment didn't last long because Rick picked her up and laid her on the bed. May was filled with passion. She thought the sex would be gentle, but it was pure passion for both of them, all night long. In the morning they continued. It was as if they were trying to cram 10 lost years into a few hours. At noon on Thursday, May said, I need food. She cooked eggs and toast and served orange juice, cooked naked. There was no point in getting dressed when they both knew what would happen next. They ate their eggs and drank their coffee. May then walked over and sat on Riku's lap. In the shower. Another offer he couldn't refuse. They spent the day in bed. At one point, May asked, do you believe that fantasy sex can be the basis of a good relationship? Hot topic. But Rick knew the answer. Yes, he received his reward. After that, they rested for some time. May then got out of bed, spun around and asked, do you like my 50-year-old body, Ricky? He knew the answer to this question too. Yes, better than her 30 years old. Complex issue. But he knew the answer. Yes, he received a fantastic award. And it wasn't that he lied. Even the last question. On Friday morning, Rick walked into his house and got dressed for work. But every day he didn't need to go to court. He had a date with May that night in a noisier dance club. He was looking forward to this. He had a date with May that night in a noisier dance club. He was looking forward to this. They had a great time at the club. May was an even better dancer than in her youth. She learned a lot, on the dance floor, in bed too, just like Rick. They returned to her house, sweaty and excited, now without hesitation. However, they were 50. They slept a little that night. We woke up at 8. After sex, a shower, and more sex, they went to a park in Maryland and walked there. We had lunch, walked some more, and then had dinner at a diner. And they returned to her home. They stayed home for New Year. No football, but they watched the parade. But May interrupted this by having sex with him on the couch. Another place was ticked off her list. On Monday, which was a day off, they went bowling. Elle was due back Monday afternoon, and Rick met her at the airport. She hugged him and asked him to go to her place. She invited him inside. Rick wasn't looking forward to this conversation. He was going to tell her about May. However, he noticed that she was unusually silent along the way. And when they went to her house, she sat down on the sofa and said, "We need to talk." Rick said, "About what?" "When I was home, I met a guy I went to school with, and we got involved." "Sorry." "Well, we never said we were exclusive. But the thing is, he works here, an assistant to a senator, and he lives on Capitol Hill." "So what are you doing?" He's a week older than me, and he wants kids. So, I thought I'd give it a try." "So we're gone." "No. Rick, I'm really gonna miss you. Dan, he's a good guy. I believe I can teach him." "What did you know when we met?" Rick laughed. "I haven't copyrighted it. I will miss you." Rick decided to be honest. He followed Benjamin Franklin's advice. He said, I spent time with my ex over the holidays. All the time, really. Day and night. We stuck together, so I'm going to miss you, really. But I'm not." Devastated. She looked surprised. "I thought you decided not to see her." "You know, after everything she did." "I thought so, but that anger seems to have subsided, and that has made room for other feelings." She said, "I'm happy for you. Ella, if I were younger, I would have asked you to marry me a long time ago. But I'm not young. I hope you have a family and a wonderful family life." "I had one until a certain point." "Thank you, I'll try. You know, I was going to seduce you one more time before leaving. I was really looking forward to it." Now, Rick said, "You're so tempting. But I don't think I should. I know I shouldn't have thought that way." She fell silent. "Well, I need to start my lessons." Rick kissed her and left. He found himself really sad. He hoped for the best for Elle. However, she was a very sexy woman. Rick thought her new boyfriend might not get strict obedience. May told her sex buddy that it was over. She and Rick alternated spending the night at each other's. After some time, they got tired of it, and they moved in with him. Before Rick agreed to let May move in with him, he decided to clarify their situation. He said, "May, if we're doing this, living together, I need to know that we're exclusive. No other guys or women. Do you agree?" "Yes. I make you a solemn promise. If you don't leave me, I will never go with another. Until the end of my days." She laughed. "Of course, if I come back in another body, all bets are off." Rick laughed. "I made the same promise to you, and this is as official as we can get. Do you understand?" "Understand." May laughed again. As close as it was possible for her, it was close. When Christmas 2023 arrived, things were going very well for them. The family was happy because of this, and Rick did his best to answer May's question. Can fantasy sex be the basis of a good relationship? So far, everything was going well.
Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.